Hey everyone, hope you had a good weekend, and I thought for Halloween we'd do something relating to the dark side of psychedelics. Talking about bad trips and how to combat them, why they come up, and how to prepare for them in case they do, because with this work, if you want to go deeper and explore your consciousness, your psyche, your spirit, reality, whatever you want to call it, you're going to eventually have to face your own fears, and obviously people already fear bad trips, let alone the things that can come up in them. So you do have to be ready for this sort of stuff. It's not always sunshine and rainbows, although there is a deeper nature to bad trips that actually reveal the underlying love of the experience and how it actually wants to grow you. But obviously it can get quite twisted, and your ego, your mind can interpret it as just complete suffering, when actually if you investigate deeper into the experience, you'll find that a lot of the times these bad trips are actually trying to polish imagine yourself as a rock, like a jagged rock, and what are psychedelics, what is your life basically aiming you towards? It's to smooth out these jagged edges of your rock, to turn you into a perfectly smooth marble. And oftentimes the easy way out is just to stay as that jagged rock, stay in homeostasis and not improve. And sometimes improving yourself can come with facing your own fears. In fact, it's probably one of the most fundamental aspects of learning about love and aligning yourself with love, with consciousness, with just your higher state of being, really, rather than your judging lower conscious egoic state, if you know what I mean. So bad trips, basically a big reason for them existing, there's a few reasons why. I'd say the main one is you have fears that you need to face. You have parts of your shadow that you've not confronted, things that you've pushed to the back of your subconscious, trauma that you've not worked through, sort of bad karma that you've not integrated or worked through, parts of reality that you judge or moralize about, where you're like, oh, this is bad or this is good, and your trips, basically, realistically, they're putting you in a higher state of consciousness, and if these are stuck in your shadow and your subconscious, they are gonna spill out into your trip, your reality. And if you resist them, it can actually be quite a traumatic experience with a lot of suffering, because realistically resisting it is just going to make the problem worse and worse and worse, to the point where you're forced to face it, but it can be extremely difficult, especially if you're resisting it so much that it completely fries your brain. And again, this is the danger of using psychedelics. If you're not serious about this work and you just say, oh, I'm just going to take a tab or some mushies and hope that they sort me out, that's not really going to do it. This sort of ties in with my episode on setting your intention for a psychedelic trip. Obviously it's good to you can have fun on psychedelics recreationally, but if you're doing it in a party setting, you're taking heroic doses, you're probably going to have a bad time. There's so many distractions in a recreational setting. The people around you, they're like the umbilical cord that tethers you to the material world, and if you start having experiences of the walls melting and losing that sense of other, and even when there are others, quote unquote, around you, that's going to be very difficult for your mind and consciousness to comprehend, and there's going to be that resistance, and with that's going to come some bad trips which can get seriously bad. Although it's good to know that no matter how bad, some cases can be extremely traumatic and completely put you off psychedelics forever and sort of fuck your life up for quite a while if it's really bad, the resistance. Even the worst of trips, say, that I've covered on this channel, say the 1000 UG LSD trip report, or microgram trip report. I know people get really angry when I say UG, but it's just a force of habit, really. Sorry, everybody. So that, my most viewed video. It was an extremely hellish experience, pretty nightmarish. Some of the visions and experiences that you had, it's just almost like a complete nightmare in waking reality that you're actually experiencing, which is pretty horrifying. But even so, even with that complete recklessness that he went into the trip with, and the probable psychological damage that he did himself, there was still kernels of positivity in it. So even though it can be very, very twisted, if you think deep into this experience, and eventually you can integrate it over years of work and meditation and subsequent safe and wise psychedelic use. Remember, slow and steady wins the race. You shouldn't be doing psychedelics I'm out of times I've had to reinforce this statement of, if you start taking psychedelics like 1 gram of mushies and then you decide, oh, I'm going to take like 5 grams the next time, you're guaranteed to probably have a bad time. Obviously some people don't, and if some people might take a gram of mushrooms and have extremely powerful experience and feel like they're ready for it next time and know not to resist and be aware of like your shadow emerging in the trip and being ready to embrace, let go and accept it. That's all good, but I think for a lot of people, they do get a bit headstrong when it comes to this stuff, and they think they're invincible, and then it kicks them in the arse, and then they perceive that trip as being completely bad, when even though it might have been not very pleasant for your mind to experience, if you actually think deeper into it, there will be stuff in that trip that is trying to guide you towards ironing out them jagged areas of your rock state of mind, if you know what I mean. The universe is wanting to polish you up and turn you into a higher consciousness loving being, and I feel like through my trips, that's one of the big insights I've learned about reality, is that what is consciousness doing over like, even just like say, let's just use human consciousness, what has it been doing ever since it sort of emerged? It's been ironing out the kinks slowly but surely over time. It's like a constantly evolving state of division and unity. It keeps coming back and forth to create even deeper levels of interconnectedness, and sometimes the road does get quite tricky, and we can oftentimes interpret things like, oh yeah, the end of the world's coming and all this, but realistically all the rocky roads down the line are just the meta nature of the universe trying to heal itself. And even in your own personal life, like say if one day you wake up, you're feeling shit, you get into an argument with your parents, you even have stuff like a car crash or an illness come up, oftentimes these scenarios are actually trying to guide you towards a higher state of being, because realistically to challenge yourself is to grow, and to just have an easy day and not do anything with your life and just coast through it, this is going to actually cause more suffering than your deepest and most risky challenges that can actually be quite painful mentally and physically. They will actually be the ones you look back on and say, oh wow, this actually grew me in a big sense. And that can happen with bad trips. But it's also important to note that if you are feeling anxious, because even no matter how like prepared you are, there might be some anxiety. Say you've just down your dose and you're just anxious about coming up, and you're like, oh god, must be a bad trip or what, mate? It doesn't have to be, folks. Go play some of your favourite music, and in the come up period, just dance to it, like you don't have a care in the world. Just don't hold back. Big smiles, silly hand movements. Just act like an animal and just embrace it and break a sweat. And this can really help alleviate all that anxiety. And it can be a very powerful technique. You can use your body to create good emotions, and I do this pretty much every time I trip, mainly by myself, because in fact, another thing I want to note is that if you want to get really deep with this work, sometimes it's better not to actually have a trip sitter. Obviously, if you're first starting out, it can be very helpful, because again, this is a massive journey. You're going to be doing it for years if you want to get serious about this stuff and get more spiritual and aligned with love and purer states of consciousness. Eventually in your journey, you're going to get to a point where, like I said before, your trip sitters can actually be a source of distraction. And even though you might feel you're being responsible having a sitter, if you really want to face yourself, face your fears, and enter the belly of the whale, in the belly of the whale you must face your inner demons, and ultimately you're going to have to face your own death, your ego death, dying before you die, as they say. And in that state, no one can help you. And if there's someone around you, your mind is automatically going to be like, oh, help, I need help, mate, please. And that's going to cause quite a chaotic experience. You've got to accept that in your higher states of consciousness, in your deepest ego deaths, you are almost truly alone. But don't take this as a negative thing, because when you actually embrace it and let it go, it can be very beautiful and cathartic. It's just the ego that's is so attached to this sense of otherness and duality that when it actually happens, the ego skews it and makes it tough to let go. So actually being by yourself can actually help that experience a lot. That is one of the key aspects to working through a bad trip. So if it's getting really, really negative, you sometimes just got to let go and let whatever happens happen. And if you're doing psychedelics for the deep existential contemplation angle, You must go it all alone at some point. No distractions, no social nonsense, just you alone in a room facing the truth. That's where Terence McKenna went on about, taking 5 grams alone in a dark room will reveal your deepest inner workings of your mind, psyche, reality, consciousness. And you also got to make sure, even if you're doing that, not to distract yourself during the trip. Don't be tempted to, I'm just going to turn the light on now, it's getting too scary. Literally just sit there and let it whatever happens, happen. I know it's hard, but it can be done. And obviously if you work up your doses over time, take it slow and steady, then it will be easier to actually understand these things, because in your prior trips, when you're taking it slow and it amps the dosage up over time, that will chip away at that fear. That can really help, because eventually you will have to face your deepest shadows, insanity, and even physical death. And obviously it's very challenging, it's extremely challenging, but if you work through it and are conscious enough and integrate all your experiences, it is going to get easier, and so even if it does get hard, you won't have that ego to misconstrue what's happening to you. You'll be like, right, this is what's supposed to be for my greatest growth. It's definitely difficult. The psychedelic spiritual path is not for everyone. It's not for like teenagers who just fancy getting fucked, because I mean there's nothing wrong with experimenting when you're younger, but at the end of the day, if you are abusing it, it is going to kick you in the ass, because it's not like conventional recreational drugs, where you're just like having a dopamine release or a serotonin release like MDMA or cocaine or whatever. This is serious stuff that amplifies your consciousness in ways some people can't even fathom. There's a reason they've been used in like mystical, ritualistic settings for years and years and years. What do you think these shamans do to become so conscious and wise? They go into uncharted territory alone, and they face fear with head on, and they're not playing around. They know their life is on the line. That's why they treat nature and plants with humility and respect, because they're very powerful tools. So make sure not to misuse this advice, because it could be psychologically destabilizing, even fatal. You've got to be serious, mature, wise, and mentally stable to do all this stuff. If you're suffering with mental health problems, you need to iron out your everyday kinks that you have with your psyche. If you're, say, depressed or extremely anxious to the point of being like neurotic, you should probably consider therapy or like meditation. And if you just jump into psychedelics to expect them to fix you, you could really hurt yourself. Talking about this reminds me of a really good quote from the film Jacob's Ladder. If you're a Silent Hill nerd like me, you'll know that was one of the biggest inspirations for that series. And what's the biggest theme? In Silent Hill 2, the big narrative of that game is that the demons, the monsters in that, are just manifestations of subconscious aspects of the main character, actually forcing him to confront his shadow in a sense. And in Jacob's Ladder, that's a big theme to that film, about the fear of dying and not being able to let go. And these demons actually appear as, these angels that are actually trying to set you free appear as demons, because you're resisting so much that the fear, the horror has to like wake you up in some sense, because obviously like suffering, as horrible it can be actually a great sense of catharsis and relief, and allow you to let go of all your troubles. Here's a cool quote from near the end of the film. I definitely suggest you actually watch it though, in full, because it's really great.
Eckhart saw hell too. You know what he said? He said the only thing that burns in hell is the part of you that won't let go of your life. Your memories, your attachments, they burn them all away. But they're not punishing you, he said. They're freeing your soul. So the way he sees it, if you're frightened of dying and you're holding on, you'll see devils tearing your life away. But if you've made your peace, then the devils are really angels, freeing you from the earth. It's just a matter of how you look at it, that's all.
A really great quote, and one of my favourite films for sure. A big lesson that tripping has taught me is that you can't really go into a trip with an intent that lacks depth if you want to iron out the kinks in your mind, your soul, your ego, to balance out your baseline state of consciousness. You've got to go into a trip with depth and meaning and reason. I went into a lot of my trips thinking that I'd just focus the whole time on just letting the psychedelics sort me out, like how a magic pill does. But I didn't really make it clear why I was tripping to myself and what I want out of the experience and my future and what I want to assess about myself. I just assumed, I'll figure it out in this trip and the trip will expand upon this on its own. But that's not a clear intention, so the trip can go in like a very chaotic, down a very chaotic path that you're not prepared for, and then when your shadow does emerge, and you start getting bad feelings, getting bad vibes about how it's going to play out, your mind is going to skew it towards being a completely negative experience. But yeah, this isn't to say that bad trips are always going to happen. Sometimes your experience might just be like, again, everyone's different. You might just give you crystal clear vision. You just show you that we are all one. This world, this body, it's nothing but bubbles over the ocean. Everything's interconnected, non-dual in a sense. And this is actually deep. This will give you a deep sense of peace. But if you aren't sort of open to this and your mind is separated from aspects of reality and you've judged it and demonized it, then yeah, the angels will appear as devils, my friend. So yeah, just something to be aware of, really. So yeah, the deeper nature of bad trips is that even no matter how twisted it can get for some people on these trip reports, a lot of the times you actually notice that they actually did learn a massive amount about themselves. Like in that Salvia trip report I just did, obviously absolutely nightmarish, and fucking would never recommend doing that to yourself, realistically. Obviously Salvia can be used in a ritualistic, spiritual, mystical manner that can be very beneficial, but just smoking fucking 700x extract, which obviously I don't even know if 700x was really, might have been a marketing gimmick. I was just using the title for that because realistically that's what the guy said, and I just didn't want to manipulate the original intent of his story. But even with that, at the end of it, he says he learned so much about himself, and in a way it made him more appreciative of life, even though it did give him fucking like PTSD in a sense. So yeah, even within the twisted, disturbing aspects of reality that we like to demonize and judge, there is a deep wisdom sort of in the suffering. And yeah, you've got to understand that your suffering isn't random. In your suffering there is actually great intelligence. It's literally your unenlightenment. The intelligence of the universe is presenting you with all these scenarios which want to smooth you out in the exact ways you personally need smoothing, and everyone's different. Everyone's going down a different path, and sometimes the road to the journey towards the end is going to be different for everyone, and it can be hard to see the nuance that inside that. All of these individual tiny aspects of suffering, like financial difficulty, feeling lost in life, these are all messages of growth, that calls to adventure and the call to your higher self. And the universe doesn't want to make it easy for you, it wants to challenge you, because realistically, if you explore yourself deeply, you realise that you actually want to challenge yourself in like extremely profound ways. It's the journey of life is more elegant than just being sent a fucking email by God saying, oh yeah, you need to do all these things to sort yourself out, lad. Your suffering is literally the universe's form of giving you that email or text message in the most nuanced, intelligent, deeply designed way. So yeah, don't go looking elsewhere for growth. It's actually all the stuff you're avoiding. Money's not growth. Pleasure isn't growth, and seeking isn't growth. Growth is how you're being, and this in essence is actually karma. It's not some like silly law of universal justice. It's the universe or God or consciousness trying to optimize itself in the same way it smooths out rocks in the sea, turning them into pebbles. And when that rock doesn't understand the bigger picture, it can be in for a very tough time. It's in for a grind, but yeah, resisting that process is going to hurt you, and that's why letting go is so important. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, my friends. Getting deep today, boys. I'll do another one of these in the future, because there's a lot can be talked. There's lots that can be talked about regarding this sort of stuff. The main reason I'm sharing all these trip reports is to like bring a greater sense of awareness to the deeper healing aspects of psychedelics, and just wanting to spread awareness of like how all these individual experiences can tie together. even all the dark ones. That's why I choose to explore. People say, oh, why aren't there more like positive trip reports? I actually like to focus on the mystical ones because they go the deepest, and oftentimes, yeah, it comes with like aspects of negativity. Like, it's not always sunshine and rainbows. Obviously, it's great to have a psychedelic experience and just have it all be great. There's everything. You can learn something about every single one of these experiences, no matter how you assess it as being good or bad. There is something to be learned out of all of it. So yeah, let yourself get polished by the universe, and embrace your suffering in these trips, and you will turn out okay in the end. Everything will be sound in the end, I reckon. So yeah, I hope you're all doing good, and if you plan on using psychedelics soon, remember to heed some of this advice, and I'm sure you'll find yourself going through a deep state of growth. And if not, then come back to me next time for more. Yeah, see you later, guys. Bye bye.